Media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome to the Mission Ready Men briefing right here on the SHR Media Network, where masculinity is still in fashion and faith has not been neutered. Today is Tuesday, March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day if you celebrate in the year of our Lord 2026. Today we are going to get into something bigger than politics. It's kind of a theme that we have going here, but we're gonna get into it a little more. We have media figures, some more relevant than others, attempting to rewrite reality. Security debates are being polarized to an absurd level. Elections are being decided by a single vote. And when truth gets replaced with a narrative, security becomes optional. People stop trusting elections. Systems that control the levers of power collapse. So let's get after it. Now, before we do that, do me a favor and hit the like button, subscribe to the show, subscribe to the channel, share, because we want to, well, obviously we want to get the word out, but we're kind of in the algorithm's kung fu grip right now. We're still growing, but it has slowed down a little bit. So every click, every like, every share helps us out tremendously. So if you could do me a favor and do that, that would be outstanding. All right, let's get into this. We have, as I mentioned, media figures, some more relevant than others. This one is largely irrelevant these days, but what this person said was so ridiculous. And there was a 2.5-hour podcast, I think, that this person was on. I didn't watch the whole thing. I'm not even, it was, the things that did come out of it that have been clipped are just so ridiculous, but they are ridiculous, but I still want to talk about them because it speaks to the larger narrative that we're talking about. And I almost don't even want to say it, but because it just sounds ridiculous. But Joy Reid, she said in a podcast that the Congo would have been a real life Wakanda if not for the West, aka white colonialism. That's an interesting story, but it is also complete and utter fiction. Complete fiction. The real story of the Congo is corruption, oppressive dictatorship, and looting by the elites. And she's one of these media figures that is replacing reality with ideology, with a prescribed narrative. And even though she's irrelevant, as I said, it does tend to erode trust. And so, as I said, she claims that the Congo would be, and I mean, just to say that, compare that to a fictional comic book locale. I am a huge fan of Marvel Comics. I'm a huge fan of the MCU. I'm a huge fan of Black Panther, always have been. This is just retarded. But anyway, let's let's get into this, because this is, as I said, this is just stupid. And then we're going to get into why it's stupid after we listen to this madness. If we can get it up on the screen, there we go.
If there is a real Wakanda, it's the Democratic Republic of Congo. It has every mineral that you need to make iPhones, your cell phone, the cobalt. It has gold, every mineral, silver, copper, everything. Yeah. It has every mineral in the greatest abundance on the entire planet. It should be the richest nation on earth. And instead, it's just completely exploited because of Europe and the West. Yeah. And these companies like Apple and all of these oligarchs around the world, they just view it as a place to plunder, like they've always viewed the continent.
So, yeah, there's that. The argument is emotionally satisfying, I guess. It is simple to the point of being stupid, as I already said. But she blames everything on Western exploitation, which, as I mentioned earlier, is just code for white people. And it is a popular narrative these days. But the reality, as is usually the case, just turns that completely on its head. She's right. Congo does have enormous natural resources. And it should be, based on that alone, it should be a very wealthy country. They have, like she said, cobalt, copper, gold, diamonds. It should be enormously wealthy. But it has one of the most corrupt governments ever. So she's completely missing the point. She's completely missing a very relevant part of the story. After the colonial leadership in Congo looted the country, and the Congo gained its independence, warlords and other corrupt officials continued to plunder the resources. They sold billions, and that money just completely vanished. Well, it didn't vanish. I mean, obviously, it went into the pockets of the elites and the people in power, the warlords in power. Corruption is what explains the collapse of the Congo, not white people. She said something else in this podcast. As I said, this podcast was about 2.5 hours, I believe. And the clips in the little bit that I did see, it was just utter dribble, honestly. But this is another thing that she said that perhaps may even be, no, it is, because what she mentioned before is fiction. But what she said here is based in it. Just listen, and then we'll get into it.
Now, I'm not saying that that regime is not bad, but by the way, our regime is not good. Our regime has secret police. They have secret police. Our regime is oppressing women, taking away abortion rights, taking away women's rights in like 26 states, some states where they're trying to have the death penalty for having an abortion. They also oppress women. They have the highest rate of women who are in STEM careers. We're kicking women out of the military, out of university. We're saying that DEI means women can't be hired for high positions in the sciences. So we're marginally better. And we're doing it for Christianity, they're doing it for Islam, right? Yeah. So it's like we don't get told those things because it would take away the kind of American exceptionalism narrative that makes it easy to take our people and send them off to die in a war that we have nothing to do with, that we don't.
This person, as she's sitting up here culturally appropriating white women's hair, She is one of the dumbest people in media today. She really is. Now, because I really think she believes this. I really think she believes this. She believes that women are oppressed in the United States. Well, she believes that women are oppressed in the United States, period. And that is just so not true. As she's sitting up here on a podcast, a multimillionaire, she made millions of dollars while she was on BS Now, pushing pushing lies. She made millions of dollars. She has the freedom. She has the resources to do whatever she wants. But she's oppressed because reasons, I guess. We don't in this country beat women for not dressing a certain way. We don't throw acid in women's faces for not wearing certain pieces of clothing. We don't do that to women who renounce a religion or speak against the government like she is so freely doing and has the right to do. She can't, and it's not unique to her, obviously. The left in general, when they can't tell the truth about something as obvious as what's going on in the Congo or Iran, how can they be trusted with anything? When they still, to this day, will try to argue that men can be women, one of the most basic things that 4 and 5-year-olds understand. If they can't be trusted to tell the truth about that, how can they be trusted with anything? This is how systems collapse. A lie repeated often enough becomes the narrative, and people believe it. There are people who believe everything that she says. There are people who probably don't know anything about the Congo who will listen to that and take it as the gospel truth. These people, when President Trump said that the media was the enemy of the people, he was not lying. He was not lying. So not only do they not tell the truth, but they completely ignore threats because they won't tell the truth about a story. Someone in the chat said Abby Phillip is a close second for dumbest. Yeah, I actually made that point in a show before. They're neck and neck, and as far as intellect goes, and Abby Phillip may be dumber. Honestly, it like I said, it's neck and neck. It's neck and neck. But anyway, these people, they can't tell the truth about anything. So they can't tell the truth about threats that are happening right here at home. And I say that because when they can't tell the truth and the narratives replace reality, bad policy is inevitable to follow. And one of the bad policies that we lived through the 4 years of the abomination that was the Biden presidency, that was some epically bad policy. And one of the policies that I'm talking about is the immigration policy, which was basically throw the doors wide open and come on in. Everyone welcome. And Congressman Chip Roy introduced the Pause Act, and he actually introduced this last year, and it didn't go anywhere. And so it's come back around in light of all of the things that we're dealing with right now. And the Pause Act is some legislation that there shouldn't even be a debate. It really shouldn't even be a debate right now. But because we have these leftists who hate this country in office blocking this stuff, this is what we're dealing with. But Chip Roy in the Pause Act, it calls for an immigration freeze. And I think he's 100% right. I think we do need to we need a complete moratorium on all immigration. I don't think the Pause Act goes that far. I think it should. All of it. Stop it. We are closed. But let's listen to what Chip Roy had to say about the Pause Act.
That are more interested in playing politics and trying to focus on protecting those who want to endanger Americans than standing with an administration and the president and Secretary Noem who want to secure Americans. So you asked me about the Pause Act. The fact of the matter is we have 51.5 million people in this country who are foreign born. That's about 16% of the population. That's higher than at any other point in our history. So go back to 1920, where we had maybe a similar percentage. It was about 15%. And we had a whole bunch of people who'd come here who, by the way, were more interested in assimilating, who were participating in schools that actually taught that America's great.
And that's a big part of it right there. Back then, the people who wanted to come here because it was different from where they left, because they had more opportunities, because it was better. The people coming now, they wave their own country's flags and want it to be like the place they left. Well, then why didn't you just stay there?
and when we had no social welfare state. Today, we have millions of people who have come here who don't want to assimilate, who aren't in schools teaching that America's great, and they are on the social welfare state. We need to pause immigration. We need to fix our system. We need to end diversity visas, end chain migration, the kind of people that allow their cousins and uncles and aunts to come in. We need to stop the abuse of H-1B visas. We need to end birthright citizenship. We need to codify what the president has done. We need to stop having taxpayer funding of illegal alien children in our schools, as we do in Texas and everywhere else. And we've got to center our entire immigration system. So pause and let's fix it. I think we need that for the country. We did it in 1920. Our country was stronger for that for about 4 or 5 decades. And now for 50 years, we've been blowing the lid open and allowing people to come here, including radical Muslims, radical Islamists who want to undermine Western civilization and our.
He is spot on. And that's the biggest problem for me, because we really have no idea how many radical Islamists we've let into the country. None. And now, in light of what's going on in Iran right now, and what we saw over the past couple of weeks with the attacks, like I said, it should be a no-brainer. It shouldn't even be a debate. The borders should be closed. But of course, the leftists say it's discriminatory. Yeah, and we should be discriminating. We should always be discriminating about who we let in. Discriminating in and of itself is not a bad word. Discriminating is discernment. We should know exactly who we are letting into this country. But it's common sense. It's common sense security measures. But these people, they couldn't care less about you. They couldn't care less about the risk to this country. I mean, they just elected an Islamist mayor in New York. I mean, what does that tell you? But that's a whole other story we're not going to get into right now. But we have historically restricted immigration during periods of national security crises. And I submit that what is happening right now between the radical Islamists and the cartels is a national security crisis. And so, how much risk should we be willing to accept? Well, I don't think we should be willing to accept any, and we should do everything in our power to mitigate those risks. Letting people into the country is not just about compassion. It's about whether we have a right to decide who comes into this country and whether or not we have a right to defend ourselves and protect ourselves. And of course, we do, despite what the left would have you believe. I mean, we have a regime in the Middle East that routinely chants death to America. And we just throw the doors wide open. Why? Well, there's only one reason I can think of. And that reason is they hate this country and they want to see it destroyed. so that they can, in their power, so that they can build it back up and reap the benefits. The government's primary responsibility, the one that the left refused to acknowledge, by the way, in the State of the Union, but their primary responsibility is to protect American citizens. And when they refuse to protect the people, we fall back on something that predates the swamp in Washington, and that's the Constitution. And so we're going to get into a little bit of that after the break. But I want to get a word in from our sponsor. And the sponsor for today's show is a shameless plug, and that is the SHR Media Shop. We have all kinds of great gear. We have all of the logo shirts for all the different shows. We have the SHR Media logo hoodie. We have the logo shirt for the Edge of Liberty with Sackhead Sean, the Reaver of Common Sense tee, the Conservative Sherpa tee, of course, the Mission Ready Men Briefing tee, and the new guy has a tee, Beer and Bolstein. That is a really cool design. Sean was talking about it in his show the other day, and it is a really cool design. And of course, we have the 250 Reasons to Read Source Documents t-shirt. It is a limited edition, so be sure to get yours before we run out. It is 250 Reasons to Read Source Documents, which is in a celebration of our 250th anniversary of this country. So be sure to head over to the SHR Media Shop. You can get there by going to, just go over to SHR Media, and the shop is right there at the top of the page, and it will bring you right to the SHR Media Shop. So be sure to check that out. All right, y'all, I am Big E, and you are watching or listening to the Mission Ready Men Briefing right here on the SHR Media Network, where you can catch our great lineup. We have Sackhead Sean with the Edge of Liberty every Monday and Wednesday at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. Jersey Joe, the Reaver of Common Sense, has his show every Monday and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. BZ in the Berserk Bobcat Saloon every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. And the new guy, Beer and Bolstein with Lyle Armstrong every Friday and Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. So please be sure to check out all those great shows, like and subscribe to the show, subscribe to the channel, and pray for us that we break out of this kung fu grip, this death grip that the algorithm has us in right now, because we want to continue to reach as many people as we possibly can. All right, so now back to the briefing. And I mentioned the Constitution. Like I said, when governments fail to protect its people, provide security, the people, we the people, can only fall back on God and then the Constitution. Donald Trump recently endorsed Brandon Herrera for Congress to represent Texas's 23rd congressional district. So let's just check out this statement if we can. Oh yeah, it's kind of small. I'll just go ahead and read it. Today, I am endorsing America First patriot Brandon Herrera. Yeah, you still can't see it. Who's running to represent the wonderful people of Texas's 23rd Congressional District. That is a district that, and his name escapes me at the moment, but he was scandal plagued and an anti-2A guy. So he's gone. He had an affair with one of his staffers and she ended up horrifically committing suicide. But anyway, Brandon is strongly supported by many highly respected MAGA warriors in Texas and Republicans in the U.S. House. As your next congressman, he will work tirelessly to advance our Make America Great Again agenda. Brandon will fight hard to grow the economy, cut taxes and regulations, advance made in the USA, unleash American energy dominance, safeguard our elections, champion school choice. And then he goes on to say, and protect our always under siege Second Amendment. If I still lived in Texas and lived in the 23rd District, I would obviously be voting for Brandon Herrera. For those of you who don't know who he is known on YouTube as the AK guy. He is a huge Second Amendment advocate. He is a firearms manufacturer, designer, instructor, and he represents a younger generation of Second Amendment leadership. I think he's in his early 30s, if I'm not mistaken. He's what they call a gun tuber. He's got his a YouTube channel that is devoted to the Second Amendment and guns. And he is, I don't know how familiar you are with what they call gun tubers, but on the one hand, you have guys like OGs like Coleon Noir. He focuses mainly on new and exciting things in the gun world. Don't get me wrong, he does advocate for our rights, but that's not his main focus. And then you have guys like the late Paul Harrell, who was a tactician. And if his stuff is still up on YouTube, I highly recommend you check it out. He was as good as it got. He talked about different ways to defend yourself in certain situations, and his videos were not short. I mean, he would spend time explaining and demonstrating, so it's worth checking out. Along with guys like Massad Ayoob. So I guess those guys would really be the OGs, because Massad Ayoob, I've known about him since I was in high school, and I am not in high school anymore. And then you have tools like Caleb Giddings. He tried to come at Paul Harrell and Massad Ayoob and got just jolly stomped. But then you have guys like Mr. Guns and Gear and Brandon Herrera, who are the younger generation who are all in on gun rights. And their main focus is protecting the Second Amendment and getting back the rights that have been systematically eroded over the past 40, 50 years. And there's an analogy. Well, yeah, I'm not going to get into that because I really want to focus on Herrera, because he represents what is not just your grandfather's Second Amendment gun rights advocacy. He's younger. He's much more direct. He pulls no punches. And he's more culturally aware and relevant. And I think he's going to make an outstanding choice in Congress. He should have won. He should have beaten Gonzalez before, and we'll get into that a little bit later as well. But the Second Amendment, and this is why I really appreciate guys like him who advocate so hard for the Second Amendment. It's ultimately about authority. And who holds the force in a free society? Is it the government alone? Or is it we the people? And of course, the left wants it to be the government. I mean, Tim Kaine said as much. He said that our rights come from the government. So the left wants the government and the people who protect them to be the only ones with guns. That's it. But the Constitution and the founders who wrote it had a different idea. They didn't trust centralized power, not by a long shot. They recognized that men cannot be trusted with power. James Madison said in Federalist 51, I believe, that if men were angels, government would not be necessary. That's why the Second Amendment exists, so that we, the people, could check the government. Because governments composed of men, or people, if you want to be inclusive, bend towards the tyrannical. And our Constitution and we the people check that. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. It's not even really about self-defense, although tangentially it kind of is, but its main purpose is to make sure that we can remind the government who the country actually belongs to. And despite all of their machinations in Congress, despite all of the ways that they amass power for themselves quickly once they get to Congress, it belongs to us. But they get a taste of that power, they get a taste of that money, and they forget that. And it's up to us to remind them. But those constitutional protections, they matter a great deal. But when the system chooses the leaders in a fraudulent manner, it loses all credibility. It's just another indication that the system has failed. We are a representative republic. We elect our officials. If those elections can't be trusted, then where do we go? That's why this is so important. And one of a story that caught my eye, and it is indicative of it's indicative of the plight that we find ourselves in with regards to voter integrity, immigration, all of it. And in Florida, in a city that has been historically Republican for decades, run by a Republican mayor for decades, a Democrat just won that mayoral race. And they won the race by a single vote. A single vote. No, not that one. Yeah, that one. There we go. Andy Thompson won this race by a single vote. 7,568 to 7,567. So when they tell you that election integrity doesn't matter, that voter fraud happens so infrequently as to be statistically insignificant, point to that. Point to Boca Raton, where the mayoral race was decided by a single vote. Not 10, not 100, not 500, a single vote. That means that every single ballot mattered. Especially when the city has over 100,000 people, 100,000, I believe, registered voters. That might be the entire population. I can't recall at the moment. But as you could see, only 20,000 showed up to vote. That's a problem in and of itself. So when they say it's so rare, it's statistically insignificant, well, that's nonsense. On paper, that may be true. On paper, looking at the numbers, okay, fine. I'll give you that. But that argument ignores a very, very critical point. And that point is that elections are not decided by electoral averages. They're decided on the margins. And in close elections like this, the margins are where it's at. The margins are everything. A single vote won this election. A handful of votes, dozens of votes. We've seen elections all across the country won by single-digit vote totals, by dozens of votes, even by hundreds of votes. And in larger cities, as those numbers grow, who knows? Now, I'm not suggesting that the race in Boca Raton was stolen or there was election fraud. I don't know, and I haven't really seen any reports to suggest that it was "quote unquote" stolen. But that doesn't matter because it was a single vote. So even if 2 votes were fraudulent, in the wrong direction. Who knows? One bad ballot could be one stolen vote. And that one stolen vote could be the difference. And so why wouldn't you want to protect against that? Well, there's only one reason. There's only one reason. And I think we all know what that is. Fraud doesn't have to be widespread to be effective. Imagine, like I just take this election, the Boca Raton election. And again, I'm not suggesting that this is what happened, but just imagine for a second if 2 or 3 votes were fraudulently cast. I mean, what then? Of course, only the left is allowed to claim that elections can be stolen without being deemed a threat to democracy or something like that. But that brings us to one of the biggest stories in the cycle right now, aside from the war in Iran, and that is the fight over the SAVE Act. And I know that they're debating it in the Senate right now. We'll see how that goes. But Brandon Gill and Anna Paulina Luna have some strong words about the SAVE Act, and let's go ahead and take a look at that.
Under Joe Biden, where the Democrats let in millions of illegal aliens. Those people are going to vote in our election system. We've already seen many of them voting in the past. You're going to see a much bigger percentage of them voting in the future if we don't get this legislation signed. Whenever the American people are demanding something, the president is demanding something, and something that is so common sense as voter ID, now is the time to get it done. This is, I think, maybe one of our only chances to get it done, and that's why I'm withholding my vote on any bill other than DHS funding that the Senate sends over to the House until the Senate gets this done.
We all campaigned on election integrity. The president literally got shot. I don't know if the American people remember that, and still won by overwhelming majority. And yet you have, senators, both Democrat and Republican, saying they won't support this, and that's unacceptable. And so, yes, they will not pass any legislation. We have the votes to kill it. No rules will pass. None of their legislation will get through. Again, I do think, though, that FISA, the only way that this is going to actually pass with Save America is by attaching it to it. And so we're willing to hold the line. Look, we are on the side of history here. We have the American people with us. This is an overwhelmingly popular issue, and the president supports it. And so, Mr. President, we will be doing everything we can in the House to actually get this on your desk.
I mean, there is really only one reason. There's only one reason to oppose the SAVE Act. And I think we all know what that is. The SAVE Act requires, just so that we're clear, the SAVE Act requires proof of U.S. citizenship to register to vote, a photo ID when voting, and a mandate that prevents states from registering voters without citizenship documentation. And that happens. It happens in California. You go to get a driver's license. If you're an illegal alien and you get a driver's license, they register you to vote. I mean, this is documented. Don't believe me, look it up. This has been documented. So to suggest that it doesn't happen, and even to suggest that it happens so infrequently as to be insignificant is just ridiculous on its face. But even if we stipulate that for the record, okay, fine. Why wouldn't you want, there isn't a country on the planet that allows non-citizens to vote in their elections. I take that back. The UK does allow residents of the Commonwealth of Nations to vote in their elections. And we see how that's working out for them, don't we? Another provision of the SAVE Act is to require states to verify voter rolls and remove non-citizens. And this goes back to why the border's wide open. The border was wide open because they needed to get these illegal aliens in so they could get them on the voter rolls so that they could regain power. And so again, the only reason to oppose this is because you want to cheat. That's it. That is the only reason. If there's another reason, another legitimate reason you can think of, please let me know. Please let me know in the chat. Please let me know in the comments. Speaking of the chat, thank you all for being here. I want to thank the moderators for holding it down in the chat. Thank you all. I really appreciate you being here, whether you agree or not. We love the interaction. We love to try and persuade you. So thank you all for being here. We really, really appreciate it. So again, putting in safeguards, putting in accountability measures. Why wouldn't you want to protect your elections? Aside, leaving the UK aside, most serious countries around the world do not let non-citizens vote in their elections. And the only reason we do is because the Democrats need to cheat in order to win. And so that brings us right back to the idea of legitimacy. If voters believe that the outcome is manipulated, then how can they trust it? And I think we know that elections these days, and I think it goes back even, I know for me, and since I've been paying attention to this, it goes back to Bush Gore in 2000. It may go back further than that, but that's the perspective I have. And if it does go back further than that, please let me know. I'd love to hear about it. I haven't really thought about it until now to look it up. But the trust in the elections has steadily gone downhill now for decades. So, and Republicans are trying to do something about that, and the left isn't. So what does that tell you? It's not ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not about who wins. It's about whether or not the system can be trusted. And if the system can't be trusted, eventually the system is going to completely break down. It's breaking down now, but once it completely breaks down, what's left? Anarchy? And I know that there are some people who who want that, but we don't. There was a time when security was not a left-right issue. There was a time when the most basic things Democrats and Republicans could agree on. I know it's been a long time since that was true, but it was at one point true. But this is what institutional erosion looks like. And if we're not careful, it's going to completely erode. And when these systems erode and start to fail, there's still a responsibility. Someone still has responsibility to try and fix things. The responsibility shifts away from the systems that are in place, and it reverts back to the people. It really always has been with the people. But when the systems that the people voted for and put in place no longer work, then it's up to the people to put new systems in place. And so what kind of people are required to put those systems in place and hold a society together? As we can see, civilization is not sustained by bureaucratic systems. Bureaucratic systems put together by men who are hungry and greedy for power fail. I mentioned before, the founders knew this. So when the bureaucratic systems fail, men of character need to step up. And there is a standard of men, and the scripture is very clear about that standard. 1 Corinthians 16:13 gives us a direct command. Be watchful, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong. Paul doesn't tell us to act like victims. Paul doesn't tell us to act like women. He doesn't say to act like consumers. He doesn't say to act like bystanders. He says act like men. Watchful. Be aware of what's around you. And not just physically. That is important. But what's happening around you in terms of culture, in terms of the political aspect. Be watchful about everything. Stand firm. Don't bend with the wind. Don't bend to cultural pressure. You have convictions. You have a standard. Stand on it. And if you don't, find one. Be strong spiritually, morally, and physically. I talk about this a lot. when it comes to men, manhood, masculinity. It's not about aggression. It's not about, when I've talked about dangerous men before, it's not about instilling fear into people who are around you. It's about being responsible for them and being the type of person, the type of man that people can count on to be responsible for them, to protect them. It's not domination. It's disciplined responsibility. But another thing that men need to need to take heed on and accountability for is not just responsibility, but competence. Strength alone is not enough. And especially as we get older, and I'm not anywhere near as strong as I was physically in my 20s and 30s, time and illnesses have taken care of that. But my strength comes from Jesus Christ. But you also have to be competent. Christian men are required to pursue truth and competence. 2 Timothy 2:15 says, be diligent or study to present yourself approved to God, a worker who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Truth is something that we have seen in this country just completely go by the wayside. Truth is something, we hear it all the time. Your truth, speak your truth. Well, there is no your truth. There is the truth, and everything else is a lie. There are two genders. Anyone like Talarico or any of his ilk who say there's more, they're lying. They're lying to you and they're lying to themselves. If they actually believe it. I'm not sure that a lot of them do, but there's that. But getting back to the point here, we're required to be diligent, disciplined, and study. As I said, not just what's happening around us and in society, but hone your mind. And let me just say this before we get any further. I am not saying this as somebody who lives this perfectly, not by a long shot. I'm human just like you. I fall into laziness. I fall into whatever the case may be. I don't live this perfectly. And anyone who tells you that they do, they are lying to you. But I have a goal. I have a standard that I have to reach. And men have to have that guidance, that standard that they want to achieve. And as men, we're not supposed to be lazy. We're supposed to study. We're supposed to be disciplined. We're supposed to understand the world in which we live. And you can't do that if you're not aware of what's going on around you. If you don't study, if you're not familiar with history, if you're not familiar with source documents. Another shameless plug. A man has to be prepared. And you can have all the faith in the world, but if you don't have discipline, that's just sentimentality. It's wishful thinking. A man who doesn't study and doesn't seek the truth is abandoning one of the first commandments that God gave us. Masculinity, strength without character is just tyranny. You see it all the time with men who are boastful and loud and obnoxious and think that they're tough, and they go around trying to impose that toughness on everyone around them, whether it's their wives or their children or whatever. And those are the men that people are afraid of. Their families anyway. And that's not what masculinity is supposed to be. Galatians 5:22 and 23 gives us the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. That's not weakness. Those are signs of maturity, spiritual maturity, especially self-control. I like to think that I've, over the years, especially as I've come to know the Lord, that my self-control has gotten better. There was a time when it was not, and I freely admit that. And anyone who knows me, who knew me back then, would tell you that. Because a man who can't exercise self-control, who can't govern himself, can't lead anything. And as men, we're required to lead. Self-control is the foundation of masculine authority. And that brings us to what the culture is telling us about masculinity. Modern culture treats masculinity as something dangerous, as something toxic. Boys are told to sit down and shut up. Men are told we need to apologize for asserting ourselves. And men are treated in the media, in entertainment, as buffoons, completely unworthy of any respect whatsoever. And when you look at the way they are portrayed, those men are unworthy of respect. And that is the portrayal, that is the standard that society has set, which is completely antithetical to what God has called us to do. In our culture today, leadership is treated as oppressive. But Scripture never, ever apologizes for masculinity. The Scripture tells us to be strong. The Scripture tells us to be disciplined. The Scripture tells us to be faithful and responsible. So despite what society would have you say or have you think, the problem it has nothing to do with masculinity. Well, no, I take that back. The problem does have to do with masculinity, but the problem is not masculinity in and of itself. The problem is men who have been allowed to abandon their responsibility. The problem is a lack of masculinity, true masculinity, biblical masculinity. That's the problem. We have a standard that has been set forth for us in the scripture: watchful, disciplined, grounded in truth, guided by the fruit of the Spirit that I mentioned earlier. That is the biblical model for masculinity, not being passive, being passive is what landed us in this situation in the first place. Adam was passive. The sin that made us fall wasn't Eve eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The sin was Adam not taking responsibility, being passive. So being passive is not part of the standard. Neither is being unable to control your anger. I get angry. I get angry a lot, especially at my job, which I am very thankful for. I thank God every day I have that job, even though I don't like it, but it allows me to provide for my family. So I am thankful for it. But the standard is strength under control, under God's authority. And so when these institutions, when these systems break down, which they inevitably do because they were put in place by men, the responsibility falls back to us. The responsibility falls back to Christian men. Societies do not survive because the governments are strong. They survive because men of faith are strong. So the future of any nation, especially this one in particular, is determined less by the strength of its systems and institutions, but more the strength of the men who lead themselves and their families under God's authority. So that's where we're at for that. I really wanted to make sure I got that in there. There were a few other things. Oh, I have some time, so let me go ahead and get to a couple of those things before we get you out of here. There were a few things I came across in my early prep for the show that didn't quite make it into what we were talking about. We talked before about Dan Crenshaw, and he lost his reelection bid. He lost his primary. I couldn't be happier. He is a I'll just leave it at that. I am happy that he is no longer going to be representing anyone in Congress. But he was on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, and he, for somebody who was a Navy SEAL, he has all kinds of excuses. Listen to. I am so, like I said, I am so glad this guy is not in Congress anymore. Just listen to this.
You spoke about this culture of misinformation we're living in, and you pointed to that as one of the factors in your recent primary loss. What lessons should other Republicans take from that? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I'm a unique Republican. You know, I've been the target of online smears and conspiracies for a very long time. My election was basically a product of that. You know, first of all, you have about 20% of Republican voters bothering to even vote at a primary. Mm-hmm. And then you have dozens of online smears and conspiracies that people were going into the voting booth actually believing. I mean, believing that it was worth millions of dollars from insider trading. Doesn't matter how many times we thought we had debunked that, or that other people and influencers and what have not have debunked it. All of these things, people still went in believing it. And so the lesson to be learned is, look, you've got to get the truth out. You've got to try. But ultimately, this is a question for the American people. Are you going to believe everything you read online or that's sent to you in your mail? I mean, Democrats spent almost $1 million also pushing these smears on television. So Republican voters are going to the voting booth believing what a Democrat told them on TV based on a smear headline written by a liberal reporter in D.C. So that's the lesson. And it's not just for Republican politicians, it's the lesson for Republican voters.
Excuses, excuses, excuses. Dan Crenshaw is a lying sack. And he can say all he wants that it's the result of smears and there's no truth to it. I have done what investigating I can do. Investigating, that sounds loftier than it really is. I mean, I have looked into what I could look into. I have looked into his trading history. I have looked into what I can find on his background. And it's available for anybody to see. And it has absolutely nothing to do with liberal leftist reporters. It has to do with his own actions. It has to do with him and what he's done. And he is, he's just a terrible human being. And losing the primary is just desserts. He doesn't deserve to represent anyone in Congress. I think there was one other one that he did, that he said, and we'll see if I can find it. Oh, that's right. He also said that what Republicans have been saying about radical Islam is fringe. So let me let's take a look at this too, because this is how was this guy a war hero? All props to him for his service, even though there are people who have said that he has exaggerated his record. I don't know anything about that. I didn't bother to look into that. So that may or may not be true. But listen to this.
Last time you were with us, we spoke about you felt the need for moral clarity. That was a phrase you used for some within your own party, specifically around anti-Semitism in this country. I want to read for you a few things that some Republican lawmakers said this week. Andy Ogles of Tennessee said, America's a product of English Christian culture. Muslims don't belong in American society. Florida's Randy Fine said, we need more Islamophobia, not less. Fear of Islam is rational. And Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama posted a picture of the 9/11 attack next to the New York City mayor at dinner, breaking his fast at Ramadan with the phrase, the enemy is inside the gates. What do you think of this language, and should Republican leaders speak up about it?
I still think it's fairly fringe. I mean, like, the truth of the matter is radical Islamism is bad, right? We've always known that. That should not be a controversial statement at all.
But that's not what they said.
There are plenty of peaceful Muslims who live among us. I realize that. But
and I've said this before. The so-called peaceful Muslims who live among us, as you said, they're not actually following the teachings of Muhammad. As I've mentioned before, there are people who grow up believing that they're Christians because they were raised that way and they went to church every Sunday, but they don't have a relationship with God yet. And those are cultural Christians. The people who go to mosque, have Middle Eastern names, they may be Muslim by culture, but they're not actually practicing the religion as it is prescribed in the Quran and the Hadith. They're not.
You know, that's not a mainstream narrative by any stretch. I think trying to fight it internally will probably gives it a lot more air than is necessary. We've seen that to be the case. As you know, there's a Republican conflict ongoing right now over Israel and the anti-Semitism issues, and so you know one could make the argument that speaking out against it has only inflamed it. So, look, I still think that's very fringe. I don't think that's certainly not the administration's position. And like we're going to go after radical Islam. That's why we need to fund agencies like DHS, and that's what we're going to do.
I've talked about radical Islam, which is really just Islam, a lot. And I will continue to talk about it because it is a threat. It is a threat. And I wanted to play Chip Roy. He has another bill about making Sharia law illegal in this country on a federal level. And when you look at what's happening in Texas, and when you look at what's happening in Florida, and other places, when you look at what's happening in Dearbornistan, and all these places where Islam has not just taken hold, but taken over, those communities are far worse off. And it's not just because it's not just because it's been taken over by Muslims, but they have said in no uncertain terms they are trying to take over the country. I played numerous cuts of these Islamic clerics talking about how they were going to take over the country, how they were going to make sure Islam was in every home. And you know how they do that? They force you to convert. They kill you if you don't. And if you have money, you can pay so that they don't kill you. And then as soon as you stop paying, well, then they will. So anyone who suggests, for whatever reason, that Islam is not a threat, that Islam is fringe, that Islam is mostly peaceful, that we can't blame an entire religion for the acts of a few criminals. Those people need to read. Those people need to read the Quran. And yes, I have read it. I haven't read all of the Hadith. I think the Quran is enough. Perhaps I will read the Hadith at some point. Right now I'm reading a book called The Sword and Scimitar by Raymond Ibrahim, who is an Islamic scholar. And it's about all of the early battles between Islam and Christendom. And I just started, but it is fascinating. And when you look at I've read the Quran, and then when you look at the history in terms of these battles and things like that, I mean, anyone who says that Islam is not a threat has absolutely no idea what they're talking about. None. All right, y'all. I could go on about that for a lot longer, so I will just go ahead and end it there. So that's it for this briefing. We're not just here to bloviate and fill airtime. We are here to equip Christian men, spread the gospel of Jesus Christ, and carry the banner of faith, freedom, and hope into the next generation. So if any of what we said here today matters to you, don't just watch, like, subscribe, share it with one of your friends, bring another guy into the fight. And if you want to wear what you stand for, head over to missionreadymen.com, hit Shop 7 Armors, and check out all of the great designs that we have over there about bold faith, true grit, and unapologetic patriotism. And remember, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away, but the Lord is right there with you. So keep your prayers going up and your head on a swivel. God bless.